Hello and thanks for watching this video. I'm going to present to you a new type of Bible code. It's a symbolic Bible code, and of course if it is the Bible code, it's a very old type of Bible code. The reason for this talk is not that I can give you the complexities of our symbolic Bible code, though. It is because we found two very simple grammatical noun counting checks that apply to every single Bible story that prove that this code is real. We have found two grammatical rules that the nouns of every single Bible story obey. And I'd like to present these two rules to you, and we've checked these rules on the first 220 little Bible stories of the Gospels and found them to be true. So it's our contention that this proves categorically that we have found the code of the Bible, and they're not difficult rules to check. However, statistically, although I actually did maths at university and was a maths scholar, I'm not a professional statistician, so I can't myself sort of stand up and say, yes, as an academic I confirm that this is the true Bible code. And so I'm presenting this video to people who can do that, and I'm asking you to either rebut it or confirm, yes, this is statistically significant, you have got the Bible code. So that's the purpose of this video, and I invite you to destroy or accept this work that we've done. You've probably heard already about the Hebrew Letter Skip Bible code of Michael Drosnin and Eli Ritchie. Their work on their code was first published in 1994 in a paper called Equidistant Letter Sequences in the Book of Genesis, and it was written by Witz, Tum, Rips and Rosenberg. It was in the US Journal of Statistical Science, Volume 9, August 94. That paper was thoroughly rebutted after review by 4 senior statisticians, McKay, Barr, Netton, Bar-Hillel and Calais, who were chosen by the journal. They published their rebuttal in the same journal in 1999, Volume 14. No further academic papers on that so-called Bible code have since been published. So it basically, from an academic standpoint, it died a death in 94. Although, from a religious standpoint, it was fairly obviously not the Bible code, since it didn't tell you anything about a church. But the book itself, the Bible Code, by Michael Drosnin, the first book that he wrote, became a New York Times bestseller. I should imagine it made a lot of money, and he's written a sequel since, and it's all over the internet, and it has been a successful phenomenon, but it is not the true Bible Code. And I won't go into the details of how it works, it's not really relevant. Save to say that I will go into the details of how it works. You skip Hebrew letters. You take the original Hebrew letters of the Old Testament and you miss one out, or every 2 out, or every 3 out, and you see if you can create something. And if you produce something which makes sense, you say, hey, that's part of the Bible code. And they then produce statistical arguments to say this is incredibly unlikely, but there are many statisticians who checked into it and found no, any long book would have exactly the same, would give you the same results. So there's nothing peculiar about the way the Bible is written in terms of that particular letter skip code. I'm actually on much safer ground with my code than with that code. All right, more recently, the Da Vinci Code has become not only a worldwide best-selling book, but also a Hollywood movie starring Tom Hanks. And as this video is being made, there's a High Court action in the UK in plagiarism against Dan Brown, the author of the Da Vinci Code. And here is the Da Vinci Code book. This is a fiction. I mean, it's about, I believe it's about corruption in the Catholic Church. But again, it shows there's a great interest that the public have in a sort of Bible code. Although this is a fictional code and it isn't the true Bible code. And this one is a real attempt at a code, but they don't get it. Right. Now, in 1992, 2 years before the Bible code of Michael Drosnin and Eli Ritchie was first published, actually in January 1992, we, which is me, was me and a couple of friends at the time, started working on the symbolic language of the Bible and found evidence for a symbolic grammatical code. And we discovered some of the main principles of this code later in 1992, and we've been working with them and refining them for the last 14 years. And here is one of our Bible code books, rather larger than its competitors, but a hell of a lot less successful. We gave it away free. We're not actually trying to make money, we're trying to find out what the Bible code is. And we've been working for 14 years on this code. But in September last year, we found these two simple, non-theological, non-religious, and entirely grammatical verifications of our code. And this talk presents them for your statistical analysis. What I'm saying is that we can prove that the Bible is written in a grammatical code, a symbolic grammatical code, without recourse to any church doctrine. We have applied the two rules to the first 220 Bible stories of the Gospels. My understanding of statistics leads me to believe that this proves beyond any doubt that we have the Bible code. As I said, I was a maths scholar at Magdalen College, Cambridge, but I'm not an academic statistician. So we need an expert confirmation, or indeed an expert rebuttal, of the significance of our findings before we hold the big press lavish dinner. Now, as regards the false Bible code of Michael Drosnin and Eli Ripps, 53 eminent statisticians have signed a statement refuting the statistical significance of that attempt at the Bible code. Incidentally, you'll have the notes with this video, and you can read all the links if you want to check this further with the notes. Everybody who gets a DVD will get a set of notes, which I'm reading from. So we're sending this video to all those 53 statisticians. Hopefully they'll make an assessment of this code as well. And we're sending it to lots of other statisticians because we think this is the biggest thing that's happened in science, actually, not only in theology for some time. Obviously we have the code right, it's immensely significant. In the case of our symbolic grammatical code, which we've immodestly called the True Bible Code, we have not done this work or made this video for profit or movie rights or book publishing rights. We've done it because we believe and we intend to prove that we've decoded the Bible in order to prove that it was written in a code and therefore there is a God, etc., etc. And the fruits of this decoding are actually spiritual for the most part, which is hardly surprising. Firstly, let me say this. People do not normally make fakes in the absence of an original. So if there are fake Bible codes out there, and there is probably a true one hidden amongst them. Now, the Bible was originally written in Hebrew and Greek. The Old Testament was originally written in Hebrew, and here is a Hebrew-English Old Testament interlinear Bible. An interlinear Bible is a very useful tool. It has the original Hebrew, and then underneath each Hebrew word, there is the sort of literal translation. So when you read it, it reads in a bit of a strange way, but it's the most accurate translation that you can get. It ignores idiom, and it's, literally accurate. So this is one of the tools one would use to decode the Old Testament, a Hebrew interlinear Bible. And the New Testament is written in Greek. And for that we have a Greek interlinear Bible, which is exactly the same concept. You have the Greek word above, and you have the English words below. Each individual Greek word has an individual English word underneath it, and we'll show you that. Now, the code does not work on any English translation. The code itself, it works only on the original Hebrew or the original Greek. However, it is possible, once you know the code, to make a code-preserving translation. And in the case of our code, it would just be a translation which preserves nouns as nouns and things that aren't nouns as things that aren't nouns, because the code is all about nouns, because the symbolism is in the nouns in the Bible. I want to keep this talk academic, and in order to shy away from any religious aspects of the subject matter, because we don't want to alienate anybody and we don't want to fall foul of people's religious ideas or prejudices or whatever they may be. And because of that, I'd rather like to point out that Sir Isaac Newton believed that the entire Bible, both Old and New Testaments, was written in a symbolic code. And we'll come to a quote of his in a minute showing that. He spent a large part of his life trying to decode the Bible in the face of much more intense persecution than we get today. His book, Observations upon the Prophecies of Daniel and the Apocalypse of St. John, which we have here, Newton's Prophecies of Daniel it's entitled, but Sir Isaac Newton called it Observations on the Prophecies of Daniel and the Apocalypse of St. John. It was published in 1733, 6 years after he died. Had he published it during his life, he would have been dragged before a court of convocation. He would probably have lost his job, his academic career, and he was also the Master of the Royal Mint, I think. And he might have lost possibly his liberty and who knows what else. When Newton died, his library contained 1,752 books. 477 of them were on theology, 126 on mathematics, 52 on physics, and 33 on astronomy. Now, the spin on Newton we have today is pretty much the reverse of that, but that's the reality of his research as measured by a number of books. So this gives us some idea of the importance of God to Sir Isaac. His beliefs and some of his work on the symbolic code of the Bible, the same symbolic code that we've now found, can be found in books such as The Religion of Isaac Newton by the Clarendon Press, Oxford 1974, and there are some biographies which we have here. Newton by Cohen and Westfall, it's a biography of Newton's life, and there's another one that's okay, Isaac Newton by Michael White, although I don't like the term last sorcerer, but it's got a lot of interesting stuff about Newton here nonetheless. Now, Newton reasoned that the perfection he discovered in God's masterful creation of the physical universe was absent in God's literary creation, the Bible, which is, if you like, his spiritual universe. It's absent at face value, at the least. He couldn't see the perfection of the solar system and the perfection of the planets in the wording of the scriptures. Therefore, he deduced that the Bible was in a code. If you like, the perfect poetry of the heavens was not clearly discernible in the lackluster literal wording of the Bible. So Newton deduced that there must be a hidden meaning, a deeper meaning, a symbolic meaning to the book. For he that can compose a constellation would surely not forget to put the key dates in his history of the Hebrew-speaking people. What upsets me about all this is that every school child in the West today is taught about Newton's laws of motion, but none of them are taught that Newton believed in God and saw these laws merely as a proof of the perfection of his creator and a demonstration of his existence through his works. So to quote Sir Isaac, he said, this is in the Westfall book, when I wrote my treatise about our system, I had an eye upon such principles as might work with considering men for the belief of a deity. From such a point of view, science appeared as the handmaiden of religion. Its purpose was not to manipulate nature for the material benefit of mankind, but to demonstrate the existence of the Creator, the main business of natural philosophy. None of Newton's laws, which are taught in schools, are prefaced with his true motivation for discovering and formulating those laws. They just appear from nowhere in the classroom, rather like life is supposed to have appeared from nowhere on this planet. So why are we the victims of medieval religious prejudice even today? Well, people in general believe not the truth, but what is convenient. And sounding a bit moralistic here, but I think we all prefer a convenient lie to an inconvenient truth. But to academics, who are regrettably a small minority of mankind, there is nothing inconvenient about the truth. Discovering the truth is the purpose of our lives. The truth comes first, the consequences to our social standing, financial credibility, the number of people we can impress down the pub, or our attractiveness to the opposite sex, that comes second. So having lost every shred of credibility I ever had by claiming that I found the symbolic code of the Bible, although possibly retaining some credibility by pointing out that Sir Isaac Newton believed that it was there to be found, I'm left with only one option: to present you this code. Here, therefore, is the breakdown of the talk and how we'll be doing it. And I've laid it out here, you'll get a shot of this. I'll start off by talking about metaphor, allegory, symbolism, extended metaphor. We'll then present 3 rules determining how many metaphorical meanings a Bible account has, any Bible account. I mean, do they have symbolic meanings, and how many do they have? And then we'll present, having done that, the 2 rules that every noun in Bible, all the nouns in Bible accounts obey, which shows that we have the code. Then I'll show you the table of results of applying these code rules to the first 200-odd Gospel accounts, and then we'll look at some example Gospel accounts, simple examples, and then I'll go on a bit about statistical significance. That's really the agenda. So let's start with the metaphor and stating the code. Perhaps 5% of what we say is metaphor in regular speech. You know, we normally have figures of speech for metaphors, like we will say, she is really hot, or he is really cool, or you are trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, or don't count your chickens before they hatch, or Christmas has come early, or we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, etc. These are not literally true statements, they're making analogies with other events. And man has actually written books which are 100% metaphorical. Such stories are called allegorical. An allegory is really an extended set of metaphors, a set of story-wide metaphors, if you like. Animal Farm by George Orwell is the famous example. And here is a quote from that story, which there's a shot of. This is actually chapter 1, paragraph 3. And I'm going to read exactly what Animal Farm says, and then I'm going to make a symbolic interpretation of it that is probably too detailed for what George Orwell was doing, but it follows the same line of thought anyway. So this is a bit of Animal Farm here. Before long, the other animals began to arrive and make themselves comfortable after their different fashions. First came the 3 dogs, Bluebell, Jessie and Pincher. Then the pigs, who settled down in the straw immediately in front of the platform. The hens perched themselves on the windowsills. The pigeons fluttered up to the rafters. The sheep and cows lay down behind the pigs and began to chew the cud. The 2 cart horses, Boxer and Clover, came in together, walking very slowly and setting down their vast hairy hoofs with great care, lest there should be some small animal concealed in the straw. So it's a story about a bunch of animals in a barn. But it's actually, we know, the story of a political rally, really, written in terms of a farm animals convention. It's the story of the Russian Revolution and what it achieved, communism, and what it didn't achieve. So that particular paragraph is a parable, if you like, an extended metaphor. I mean, later in the book, the farm animals do stage a revolution against the farm owner, and they take over the farm. But then once the new administration run by the pigs has taken over, they start treating the other farm animals just as badly as the humans did before the revolution. Now in truth, we know that George Orwell was describing the futility of the Russian communist revolution, which did occur, and we know it's now ended, the experiment, well, you could argue it's ended, in terms of imaginary farm... and he was describing the whole Russian political experience in terms of an imaginary farmyard revolution which did not occur, whereas the Russian communist revolution did. So what I'm saying is we can make it possible to make a very accurate symbolic interpretation of that paragraph, and I'm now going to do that. Imagine that Bluebell, Jessie and Pincher, the dogs, stand for the three armed forces in what was the Soviet Union. The Army, the Air Force and the Navy. Imagine too that the pigs are the bureaucrats. Imagine that the hens are the manufacturing workers. The pigeons are the postal workers. The sheep are the clothing manufacturers. The cows are the farm workers. Imagine that Boxer is the police force. And Clover stands for all the lawyers. This symbolic interpretation turns a farmyard melee into a precise and detailed account of a political rally. It gives the whole story a second meaning. And we have discovered, and we're not the first, that that is the way in which the Bible is written. An interesting story, yes, literally true, in the case of the literal parts of the Bible, yes, but greater meanings, greater symbolic meanings, allegorical meanings are also encoded in the book. So with this in mind, please consider, now we'll look at some Bible examples of this, all right? We've looked at a George Orwellian example, just to show that mankind does do this sort of thing, and it's not completely out of our experience. But now let's look at some Bible examples of this. It came about. I'm going to look at the story of the 7 cows and the seven fat cows and the 7 thin cows in Genesis 41. This was a dream of Pharaoh, which Joseph interpreted, and I'm just going to read the story to you now, and it will be shown. It came about at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh was dreaming, and here he was standing by the river Nile. And here ascending out of the river Nile were 7 cows, beautiful in appearance and fat-fleshed, and they went feeding among the Nile grass. And here there were 7 other cows ascending after them out of the river Nile, ugly in appearance and thin-fleshed, and they took their stand alongside the cows by the bank of the river Nile. Then the cows that were ugly in appearance and thin-fleshed began to eat up the 7 cows that were beautiful in appearance and fat. At this Pharaoh woke up. Now it's a dream, and dreams have symbolic interpretations. I mean, they're allegorical. They require a symbolic interpretation. But in this case, Joseph actually gives us the interpretation later in the chapter in Genesis 41. He tells Pharaoh that there will be 7 years of feast followed by 7 years of famine. And this did actually happen according to Genesis 41. And the metaphor here was a cow for a year. And a fat cow was a year with lots of food, and a thin cow was a year with no food. So a fat cow was a year of feast, and a thin cow was a year of famine. And so there is no argument that Genesis 41 is allegorical. Certainly the dream in Genesis 41 is allegorical. So that's Genesis. But we also know that Jesus' parables were allegorical and require symbolic interpretation. In fact, Mark tells us in the Gospel of Mark that Jesus spoke exclusively in parables to the crowds, but interpreted these parables to his disciples. So what Mark actually says, and there'll be a shot of this, is that so with many illustrations of that sort, he would speak the word to them as far as they were able to listen. Indeed, without an illustration, he would not speak to them, but privately to his disciples he would explain all things. So he spoke illustratively or symbolically or in parables to the people, and he would explain the meanings of those parables to his disciples. So you could argue that Jesus' disciples are in fact symbolic interpreters, parable interpreters if you like. So that's the Gospels. Then we've got Revelation. I mean, it's obvious that the Bible book of Revelation is highly symbolic, being a series of visions and dreams. So it too requires symbolic interpretation. And if you think about the symbolic nature of the various parts of the Bible for long enough, you soon find yourself asking the question, is the entire Bible symbolic? Is it all allegorical? Well, research is about formulating the correct question, because if you do not ask the right question, you will not get the right answer. Now, it so happens that the Apostle Paul has already answered this question in the cases of Genesis 16, 17 and I think 20 something. He says in Galatians 4, and I've got a shot of this, that these things stand as a symbolic drama, referring to Genesis. These women mean two covenants. He's telling us, he's giving us the symbolic, metaphorical interpretation of the story actually of Abraham's wives. Let me read you that story, or a bit of it. Now, this is Genesis 16. Now Sarah, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian maidservant, and her name was Hagar. So here we are, Abraham and two women. Hence Sarah said to Abraham, "Please now, Jehovah has shut me off from bearing children. Please have relations with my maidservant. Perhaps I may get children from her." So Abraham listened to the voice of Sarah. Then Sarah, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, her Egyptian maidservant, at the end of 10 years of Abraham's dwelling in the land of Canaan, and gave her to Abraham, her husband, as his wife. Accordingly, he had relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. And when she became aware she was pregnant, then her mistress, who was Sarah, began to be despised in her eyes. So this is, if you like, a prophetic drama. It's a story about Abraham and his wife and her maidservant, and it literally occurred. However, it is also a story about two covenants in the greater meaning. And this is how the Bible's written. We're being told about God's plan to save us, actually through various Abrahamic covenants, and we're being told the details of that plan through a symbolic story involving Abraham's wives. And if you start thinking along those lines, later in Genesis, where Abraham disguises his wife as his sister, again, this would be a hidden covenant. If again the wife stands for a covenant, there's a disguised covenant in the Bible somewhere, is what that is saying. Furthermore, it's well known that in many chapters of Daniel, there are these chapters are symbolic, because Daniel himself interprets them in the very chapter. He interprets a giant man in Daniel 2 as being a temporal sequence of kingdoms, and a giant tree as the rulership of a king in Daniel 4. So now we can say really that parts of Genesis, parts of Daniel, most of Revelation, Jesus' speech to the crowds, all these things are extended metaphor. They're parables, they're illustrative, they're symbolic, they're allegorical. So the question then is, what is so special about the story in Genesis of the two wives of Abraham? Is Paul just telling us that only their one little story is an allegory? Or is he telling us that the whole book of Genesis is allegorical? Or perhaps is he telling us that the whole Old Testament is allegorical? In a similar vein, does Jesus' exclusive use of parables to crowds apply only to his verbal ministry, or does it apply also to his written ministry as well? And by his written ministry we mean the whole Bible, since Jesus' name is the Word of God, and the Bible is also the Word of God, and he was effectively the editor of it. So is his illustrative speech telling us how the whole Bible is written? I appreciate that some of that argument is theological, but I'm only really using it to show you why we've got this symbolic code. I mean, I don't just want to give you two noun counting rules and hey presto, we've got the code. I want to show you where it's come from to some extent. Now Newton realised this. Everything I have told you so far in this lecture, Isaac Newton pretty much knew. And let me quote you what he said to show that that's true, how we've gone backwards in 400 years. He said this, and it's quoted in the Westfall, Richard Westfall biography. "Consider how our Saviour taught the Jews in parables. that in hearing they might hear and not understand, and in seeing they might see and not perceive. And as these parables were spoken to try the Jews, I mean, that's the purpose of writing in parabolic language, illustrative language. It's that if you don't care about what the scriptures might mean, you'll never know. But if you do care, you'll make the effort, you'll interpret them, and then you'll know. So it's a trial. And as Isaac pointed out, as these parables were spoken to try the Jews, so the mystical scriptures were written to try us. So they're all parables. Therefore beware that thou be not found wanting in this trial. For if thou beest, the obscurity of these scriptures will as little excuse thee as the obscurity of our Saviour's parables excused the Jews. So Newton's saying that, he's plainly stating that the whole Bible is as symbolic to us as the parables were to the Jews. He knew this 400 years ago. He knew that the whole Bible was written in a symbolic code 400 years ago, but all mankind have ignored his findings, and they had done that until we proposed the same thing 14 years ago, and they pretty much do ignore it even today. But today we're going to attempt to prove beyond any doubt that Newton was right. 6 years ago, I think in England we made Sir Isaac Newton the man of the millennium, but we would have done better, rather than glorifying him with that title, to listen to his words. To cut a long story short, we have discovered that most Bible accounts in the Old and the New Testaments are symbolic. They are allegories, like Animal Farm. But the Bible is made up of thousands of little stories, one after the other. So how can we determine which accounts are allegorical and which ones are not? Again, to cut a long story short, we know the simple grammatical rules that determine if a Bible account has an extra allegorical meaning or not. In fact, we know the grammatical rule that determines precisely how many extra allegorical meanings any Bible account has. And now we come to the section where we actually tell you these rules I've been going on about. These rules are part of the true, the real, the Bible, symbolic Bible code, and we're now going to state them. First, we've got to make two crude definitions. So, we have to define a successive designation, and we define that to be two or more successive references to the same person or writer. So, John the Baptist is a successive designation for John, because he's referred to successively by two different things. And Jesus Christ is is a double designation for Jesus. And another example, Anna the prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel, that's a triple designation. Or a man, a householder, is a double designation. A priest, a certain one, is a double designation. Alright, now the thing about these successive designations is you can actually miss any one of them out, and the account still makes sense. If the account said, for example, that John the Baptist was in the wilderness, it would make sense if it was John was in the wilderness, or the Baptist was in the wilderness. In fact, there are three ways you can read that, all of which make sense. One is John the Baptist is in the wilderness, the other is John is in the wilderness, and the other one is the Baptist is in the wilderness. And we will see that there are actually three possible meanings to that account for that very reason. One for each of those three ways of interpreting. Then another simple, crude definition, which is that a Bible account is a scene, a little Bible story, or a collection of related scenes. Because these rules we're going to show you apply to Bible accounts, and it's not always obvious where a Bible account starts or where it ends. But crudely speaking, they're scenes, and each Bible account is a standalone scene. Although if the scenes are related, you can get two or more scenes in an account. That becomes rather like an act in a play rather than a scene. So I suppose there are lots of acts with one scene in the Bible, and there are some acts with more than one scene. Right, so having made those two definitions of what a Bible account is and what a successive designation is, we're now in a position to give you the three rules for determining how many extra symbolic meanings a Bible account has. And really we're just stating them here because we're looking for statistical confirmation. We're not deriving them. And here is a shot of those rules. So then, here are the 3 rules for determining how many extra symbolic meanings a Bible account has. And a Bible account is a scene or a collection of related scenes. And by extra symbolic meanings, we mean meanings in addition to the literal meaning of the account, or if it's a symbolic account, the straightforward symbolic meaning of that account. First rule, if an account has no successive designations and no noun recited an even number of times, then it has no symbolic meaning, no extra symbolic meaning, sorry. And there are plenty of accounts like that. No successive designations, no noun recited an even number of times means no extra symbolic meaning, or just one meaning. The literal meaning for a literal account and the straight symbolic meaning for a symbolic account. Second rule, if an account has a noun recited an even number of times, but no successive designations, then it has one extra symbolic meaning. Third rule, if an account has a successive designation, then it has a number of extra meanings equal to the largest successive designation in the account. So, for example, the account containing the phrase Anna the prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel, which is a triple designation, has 3 extra symbolic meanings, since this phrase is the largest successive designation in that account. So it has 4 meanings in total. Its literal meaning and these 3 extra symbolic meanings, and we deduce their existence from the triple designation. So that is how we determine how many extra symbolic meanings any Bible account has. If it has no successive designations and no noun recited even number of times, it has no extra meanings. If it has a noun recited even number of times, it has but no successive designation, it has 1 extra meaning. If it has a successive designation, it has the number of meanings equal to the largest such successive designation. And now we're in a great position, and we can at last come to the point of this talk and the reason I'm giving this talk. Because I can now simply explain, I can now state the 2 rules that every Bible account obeys. Before I could do that, I needed to tell you about the background and Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code and Michael Drosnin's Hebrew letter skip code, and I needed to make the definitions I've made that a successive designation is 2 or more successive references to the same person, and that a Bible account is a scene in the Bible or a collection of related scenes. And I needed to get these 3 rules across so that you see that we can simply, by just applying these 3 rules, define the number of extra symbolic meanings that every Bible account has. And having done all of that, I'm now in a position to state these 2 amazing rules, simple rules, that every single Bible account obeys. And here they are. Rule number 1. The total number of nouns acting as nouns in any Bible account is divisible by the total number of meanings of that account. So, if an account like the account which contains the triple designation Anna the prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel, has 4 meanings in total, a literal meaning and 3 extra symbolic meanings, then the total number of nouns is divisible by 4. The total number of nouns acting as nouns is divisible by 4. And we will find out later in this talk that the account containing Anna the prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel, actually has 16 nouns in it. Alright? But basically, if you take the number of meanings of an account, which we get to by the 3 rules I referred to recently, the number of nouns in the account is a multiple of that number of meanings. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2. The number of distinct interpretable nouns, or possessive noun chains, in an account is also divisible by the total number of meanings of that account. By distinct interpretable nouns, we basically mean unique nouns. There are very few nouns that aren't symbolically interpretable, and we discount them. And possessive noun chains are things like the car of Gordon, or the car of the city, or the town hall of the city of London. It's noun chains which are where the first noun is non-possessive and the succeeding nouns are possessive. But crudely speaking, to simply state these two rules, the total number of nouns is divisible by the total number of meanings, rule 1. Total number of distinct nouns is also divisible by total number of meanings, rule 2. It's slightly more technical than that, but that's basically it. Very, very simple, hidden for over 1,000 years. Incidentally, we are not the first to decode the Bible in this way. The code has information about earlier decoders who lived in, Paul decoded it too, we think. The Apostle Paul, that is. All right, now we can sum all of this up. And here you'll see a shot here of the whole lot. The two definitions, the 3 rules for determining how many extra symbolic meanings a Bible account has, and then the 2 noun counting rules, which we're going to verify now. Let me restate it once more again because it's so simple and straightforward. The total number of nouns acting as nouns in an account is divisible by the total number of meanings of that account, and the total number of distinct interpretable nouns or possessive noun chains in an account is also divisible by the total number of meanings of that account. And so now what we have to do, it's easy enough to state them, although it was very difficult to deduce them. We need to check them against every single Bible account. And that's pretty much what we've done as regards the first half of the Gospels. We have checked these rules against the first 220 of the 450 or so Gospel accounts in Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. Every account we have checked has worked once we knew how to count nouns correctly. And once we knew when the account started and when it stopped and stuff like that. And I'm now going to present to you the results in table form of those noun counts. Before I do that, let me just say this. We checked, we used an interlinear Greek Bible. I mean, there are several. Here is one, Brown and Comfort's interlinear Greek Bible. We also used the Watchtower's Kingdom interlinear Greek Bible. And you look at the Greek words, and we used extensively this analytical lexicon of mounts, which has the advantage of telling you whether the word is a noun or an adjective. And there are actually 4 words we disagree with mounts on, out of I don't know how many thousands there are in the New Testament, but they're not really major disagreements. So we have produced an English translation which preserves Greek nouns as nouns, and things that aren't nouns are translated as things that aren't nouns. So it's a noun preserving, noun transparent, noun invariant translation. We had to do that in order to do this counting exercise. And all we did was we went through all these accounts, worked out where they start, where they stopped, counted out the nouns, and found, guess what, they were divisible by a number of meanings. And here, now we'll show you, just by the camera going through on this screen, the table of our results. Okay, here is the table of the results of, I think it's actually the first 202 are in this table, the first 160 literal accounts and 42 symbolic accounts, which is 202. So here we have the 4 Gospels, the counts. This is the literal total noun count, the literal individual noun count, the literal number of threads or meanings, and the symbolic noun total noun count, countable noun count, the symbolic individual or interpretable noun count, and the symbolic number of threads or meanings. So, for example, the paternal genealogy of Jesus in Matthew 1, which is Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 to 17, there are 99 nouns in it. There are 51 individual nouns, and the total number of threads is 3. And 3 divides 99 and 51. Then we have Gabriel visiting Joseph and saying, your wife's going to get pregnant by the Holy Spirit, don't worry about it, which is again Matthew 1 verses 18 to 26. The total number of nouns in that account is 33, the total number of individual nouns is 21, the total number of threads is 3 because there's a double designation, and 3 divides 21 and 33. And we've done all this all the way through the first half of the Gospels. And here is the table of the results, which you will find more updated at understanding 49.html of www.truebiblecode.com. Now, the Gospels are parallel often. There are parallel accounts of the same event. Let me give you an example of that. The first one is John's baptism. John the Baptist. And I don't mean him getting baptized, I mean him baptizing everybody. The way that parallel accounts work is this. You concatenate them to make one giant account, and then you count the totality of all the parallel accounts. For example, here we have Matthew 3 verses 1 to 12, Mark 1 verses 1 to 8, and Luke 3 verses 1 to 18. And the total number of nouns in all three of those accounts is 84, the total number of individual nouns in all three of those accounts is 54, and the total number of threads in, well, actually any one of those accounts, because they're concatenated so it becomes one giant account, is 3, and 3 divides 54 and 3 divides 84. Furthermore, each one of these individual accounts does not count correctly, and that is telling you that there's a complementary parallel account. So the code reveals to you whether an account has a parallel or not. If the account counts perfectly by itself, it has no parallel account. If it doesn't count perfectly by itself, there will be another parallel account of it in another gospel, which also doesn't count perfectly by itself, but when you add the two together, they count perfectly. And so the Bible tells you, or this code tells you, whether an account is parallel or not. And we've had some fun with that. For example, it's not generally known, but in the feeding of the 5,000, there are 4 accounts of that feeding. 2 of them in one in each gospel. And the 2 accounts in Matthew and in Mark, the feeding occurred before the sun went down. And yet the 2 accounts in John and Luke, the feeding occurred after the sun went down. So actually there were 2 feedings Jesus did of the 5,000. One he did on one particular day before the sun went down, and the other he did on a particular day after the sun went down. And we've got them in here somewhere, if I can find them. There's feed 5001, which is Luke and John, and there are 69 nouns in that account, 42 individual nouns divisible by 3 meanings. And then the one here in Mark and in Matthew, there are 68 nouns, in total 26 individual nouns and 2 threads divisible by 2. So the story of the Gospels is they're very parallel, so this parallel account stuff is important. And in fact, you can see from at the bottom of this table that we have 105 literal counts from 160 literal accounts, because basically several of these accounts are parallel, and therefore the total number of noun counts you get is less than the number of individual accounts, equal to the number of parallel accounts plus the number of literal accounts which don't have parallels. We've also counted the symbolic accounts, the parables, and here's some examples here. I mean, there's the famous parable of the sower. Here it is. It's in Matthew 13, 3 to 8, Mark 4, 3 to 8, and Luke 8, 5 to 8. Total number of nouns in that account is 30. Total number of individual nouns is 12, both divisible by 3, which is the number of threads. And there's the famous wheat and the weeds. That isn't a parallel account, it only appears in Matthew, and there are 30 nouns in it, 18 individual nouns, again divisible by 3. So, as I say, we've done the first half of the Gospels, and we say it's impossible for all this stuff to be a big fluke, and therefore this is a confirmation. It's a wonderful, non-religious confirmation that the Bible's written in a code. It's a very brilliant thing for God to have done, Apart from the fact that it's brilliant to have grammatically arranged it, of course, but more than that, it's wonderful that he can confirm that the Bible is inspired without reference to any particular church doctrine. It's a doctrine-independent proof that the Bible is inspired, which is a great, I think it's a great thing, because nobody can say, I'm not going to listen to this talk because I happen to be a Catholic, or I'm a Mormon, or I'm a Worldwide Church of God, or I am an Amish, or I am a Hasidic Jew, or I am whatever, because it's religious independent. Even a Muslim could listen to the talk. There's no theology in it. It's just a question of counting up nouns and seeing if they obey some rules. And so it's a great way to say, hey, I exist. And there, I've gone theological. So these are our results. And if you check back to Understanding 49 of truebiblecode.com, you'll see the more updated one at the time you watch this video. So now we'll look at some easy examples of gospel accounts, small gospel accounts, and we will count the nouns in these accounts and see if they obey the two rules that we have stated. As I said before, we've checked all of the Greek nouns against the analytical Greek lexicon of W.D. Mounce, and we actually only disagreed in the cases of ano, epano and kato, which we take as nouns meaning upper part or lower part, or upon the upper part. And we also disagreed with Herodian and Canaanian. We think those are adjectives, like Elizabethan, for example, whereas Mounce has them as nouns, but it's a minor point, really. So here is the smallest and simplest gospel account. It's a symbolic account, a parable, which we count, which really gives you the whole thing. And we have a shot of this. But he said to them, due to this, every scribe, having studied the kingdom of the heavens, is like a man, a householder, who brings out of his treasure new things and old things. Now, the symbolic part of this is the stuff after the like, because that's what the literal is being compared with. The kingdom of heavens is being compared with a man, a householder, who brings out of his treasure new things and old things. Incidentally, the meaning of this, for anyone who's interested, is that when you interpret the Bible, you have a modern day fulfillment and a sort of first century fulfillment normally. The modern day fulfillment is the new thing, and the first century fulfillment is the old thing. There are three symbolic nouns in this account. Incidentally, we do the symbolic nouns in green. Here's the colour scheme. Orange is for successive designations. They are the key Bible prophetic form. We call it a prophetic form. It's a grammatical construction which has a prophetic significance. So stuff in orange is a successive designation. Green we use for symbolic nouns, black for literal nouns, and we use a brown, which is hardly visible on this printout, for that's almost invisible, for a possessive noun, a noun used as an adjective. The kingdom of the heavens here, kingdom is a noun used as a noun, and heavens is possessive, so it's used as an adjective. Anyway, the symbolic nouns, we have man, householder, and treasure. There are three symbolic nouns. So the symbolic noun count, which we call the SCNC, symbolic countable noun count, is 3. Now, there are 3 meanings because this account has a double designation. A man, a householder is a double designation. So there are 2 extra symbolic meanings, so there are 3 symbolic meanings in total. And there are 3 nouns, which means that the total number of symbolic nouns is 3, which is divisible by the total number of meanings, which is 3. And as regards the individual nouns, the distinct interpretable nouns, there are 3 of them because all 3 nouns, man, householder, and treasure, are different. So that is the most basic possible count you can do on any Bible account, and that's why we've put it here as the very first one. There are 3 meanings to this symbolic account because it has a double designation, which means that the total number of nouns divisible by 3 and it is man plus household plus treasure, and the total number of individual nouns is divisible by 3 because each noun in fact is individual. So there is number 1, the simplest one. One account counted, and we verified the 2 laws for that one account. And let's look at another account. We'll look at this one now. I'll read it to you. In this hour he became overjoyed in the Spirit, the Holy. This is an interlinear translation, a very accurate literal translation. And said, I publicly praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have carefully hidden these things from the wise and intellectual ones, and have revealed them to the pre-speech ones. Yes, O Father, because to do this, to do like this, came to be the technique approved by you. All things have been delivered to me by my Father, and no one knows who the Son is except the Father, and who the Father is except the Son, and the one to whom the Son is willing to reveal him. So here is an account which has actually got 12 nouns in it. The nouns are highlighted in black, or if these nouns are part of a successive designation, they're in orange. I mean, Spirit is a noun, Holy isn't a noun, Father is a noun, Lord is a noun, Lord of heaven and of earth are possessives, they're nouns used as adjectives. So the total number of nouns is 1 for Spirit, 2 for Father, 3 for Lord, 4 for Father, 5 technique, 6 for Father, 7 for Son, 8 for Father, 9 for Father, 10 for Son, 11 for Son, and 1 for hour, which I missed at the beginning, making a total of 12. So this is how we've set up. We've written this all up, and it's all on the web. If you go to www.truebiblecode.com and you go to Understanding 49, you can see all of the work we've done, and the first half of all the Gospels is written out in this way. We've made a noun transparent translation, and we've highlighted all the nouns in these various colours to tell you whether they count, or whether they're part of a double designation, whether they're symbolic, or whether they're literal, whether they're possessive, or whether they're acting as nouns. And so there is our second Bible account, and it's got a double designation, and it actually has 2 of them. The Spirit, the Holy, is one, and Father, Lord of heaven and earth, is a second, which means that it has 2 extra symbolic meanings, which means that it has 3 meanings in total. 3 threads, we call it. And it has 12 nouns, and 12 is divisible by 3. What about the individual nouns? Well, the individual nouns are our, Spirit, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, which is a noun chain, and technique and Son. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there are 6 of them. And 6 is likewise divisible by 3. So this again confirms our 2 laws, our 2 rules, in the case of this small account of Jesus being overjoyed, that the great wisdom of God was being revealed not to the intellectual and wise Pharisees, but to the spiritual babes, the fishermen of Galilee. All right, here's the last one we're going to look at, the last account. This is the account which actually has the triple designation of Anna, a prophetess, a daughter of Phanuel, which is in orange, although the old Phanuel we've put in brown because it's possessive. And the account says this: And there was Anna, a prophetess, a daughter of Phanuel, out of the tribe of Asher. This one had advanced in days many, and had lived with a male for 7 years from her virginity. And she had been a widow until 84 of years. This is a very literal translation. It sounds a bit weird, but it's as close as you can get to what the Greek actually said. Who was never missing of the temple, rendering sacred service day and night by fastings and supplications. And in that very hour she came near and began returning thanks to God and speaking about the child to all those waiting for the deliverance of Jerusalem. Now, because this has a triple designation, it has 3 extra symbolic meanings, it therefore has 4 meanings in total. So the total number of nouns should be divisible by 4, and in fact it's 16. Furthermore, all of these nouns are different. So the INC is 16, except that we have a day and we have a days. But advancing in days was 24-hour days, whereas sacred service night and day is day meaning the 12-hour illuminated part of the day, which has a different meaning. It's a 12-hour day from the 24-hour days. And when you have the same word with two different meanings, it counts twice in the INC, because it requires two symbolic interpretations. One is a symbolic interpretation of what a greater 24-hour day might mean, and another is a symbolic interpretation of what a greater light part of the day might mean. So again, this confirms the code, and we have both of our rules obeyed. The total number of individual distinct nouns, interpretable nouns, is 16. The total number of nouns in all is 16, and the number of meanings is 4, which divides 16. So those are three accounts, and we've just taken you through them to show you how this thing starts. But to see the whole deal, everything we've done so far, if you go to Understanding 49 in www.truebiblecode.com, you can see the whole lot, and we've done about 220. And I didn't give this talk until we'd done more than 100, in fact more than 200, because I wanted to make sure that we had the Greek counting correct, and that it wasn't just a fluke that some of these accounts worked. When you've done 220 and they all work, I don't see how it can be a fluke. But that's why I'm coming to the experts, to get some kind of proper academic assessment as to whether this is a fluke or whether it isn't. Which brings us to the question of statistical significance. So, in fact, I've counted Bible accounts up to Matthew 22, Mark 12, I think, and Luke up to 11, and then a few dotted ones, and then I think 18, 19 and 20 or something. Now, I deliberately counted the first, more or less, 220 Bible accounts, so that nobody would say, oh, you just picked the accounts that happened to count right. I just started at Matthew 1:1 and went through. Now, if a Bible account has two meanings, then there is a 1 in 4 chance, I say, of these two rules being obeyed, or 1 in 2 chance of one rule being obeyed and a 1 in 2 chance of the other. I think they're pretty independent, the total number of nouns and the total number of individual nouns. I suppose there is some dependency between them. I don't think it's that significant, but it's not my call, really. So, and then if there are 3 meanings, and most Bible accounts do have 3 meanings, most Bible accounts have a successive designation, then there is a 1 in 9 chance of that account obeying 2 1 in 3 chance rules, as it were. And likewise, if there are 4 meanings, there's a 1 in 16 chance. So since most Bible accounts have 3 meanings, there's a 1 in 9 chance of these rules being obeyed in general. And as I say, the first 220 we've looked at obey this rule. And the chances of that occurring are basically 0. And so I'm challenging any statistician watching this video to knock that argument down or accept it, and come and join the big press launch where we say all these statisticians have confirmed that yes, they have got the Bible code. I mean, incidentally, at that press launch, when we get there, hoping we do, it won't necessarily be a question of, and this is what the Bible code means. It will purely be, yes, these 2 noun counts are statistically significant, this is the code. What then the Bible means is a whole other ballgame, which I'm not entering into in this talk, because there'll be enough argument about that, I'm sure. Right, I then go on in some technical detail in the notes to explain, you know, precisely how I did this, and it's all covered in U49, and that's not really the subject of this talk. I just wanted to get the basics across in this talk, and I hope that I've done that. To summarise, we have found that the total number of nouns in any Bible account, which is just a scene or a collection of scenes, is divisible by the total number of meanings, and the total number of individual nouns is likewise so divisible. And the number of meanings you can deduce by there are no extra meanings if there's no noun repeated an even number of times, and if there's no successive designation. There's 1 extra meaning if there is no successive designations, but there is a noun repeated an even number of times, and there are 2 or 3 or 4, up to 6 extra meanings we've found if there's a successive designation, which is a double, triple, quadruple, quintuple or sextuple designation, and that's the largest such designation in the account. So it's not difficult to state them, and let me refer back to the page which has them all on. This page here should be the ending shot of this talk. This sums up the entire talk, and it's taken us 14 years, or 13 and a half I should say, to deduce this, and it's taken me 4 or 5 months to confirm it for the first 220 Bible accounts. But now what I'm looking and asking you people to do, if you can, or wish to, is to confirm whether this is correct or whether it isn't, and whether it's statistically significant and whether it isn't. But you can trust me, or you may not want to, but you can trust me on the translation. I've done it all from the Greek lexicons. You don't need to actually understand Greek to confirm this. You just need to understand statistics, which I have some understanding of, but it's not that wonderful. So thanks for your attention, and I hope you find this interesting and useful.